So after the Arabs rejected this deal, and an Arab-Israeli war, as it's called, ensued, we came to the 1948 armistice, which is the borders that are familiar to us today. And that is the West Bank and Gaza being controlled by Jordan and Egypt, respectively, and then the rest being controlled by the Israeli government. So this is what we refer to as the 48 borders in general, or just 48 when we're in Palestine. And today, the 48 borders contain about 20% Arab citizens, so about 1.5 million Palestinians or Arab Israelis, as you may term them. And Jordan controlled the West Bank, and Egypt controlled Gaza, and neither of these regimes at that time were, of course, at peace with Israel. And to achieve these borders, you can see that around Jerusalem there's a sort of inroad into the West Bank. And this is because this was a heavily Arab-populated corridor, but the Israeli leadership wanted to secure Jerusalem as part of a Jewish state. And, well, to make it part of a Jewish state, you sort of had to remove the Palestinian population. And this involved massive population transfers, a lot of forced marches, a few massacres. I mean, they can only be turned. One of the best accounts of this is Ilan Pappé's book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. But basically, this was the beginning of the enterprise of transferring Palestinians out of traditionally Arab areas to sort of Judaicize them, to basically create an environment where the Jewish state would be contiguous, where it would have a Jewish majority. And thus, a lot of people, hundreds of thousands, were moved out of traditional Arab centers like Lod and Ramla and moved into what we now call the West Bank. And this is what people mean when they say Palestinian refugees. These are people who left their homes during this war and fully expected to, and under international law had the right to, return to them. And when Palestinians talk about the right of return, they mean people who lost their homes in 1948 and are now scattered across the West Bank, across Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. And they claim, and this is what they claim as the right of return. And these people and their children and their children's children remain classified as refugees in every country to which their grandparents escaped. And so this was the situation for about, for exactly 19 years, at which point we had the Six-Day War, or the 1967 war, where Israel took control over both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, as well as the Sinai, although that was given back to Egypt in 1973. And this is when the settlement enterprise really began. And what settlements are Jewish colonies in the West Bank. And the settler movement has become a very sort of powerful movement within Israeli society. Several of the major parties are unabashedly pro-settlement. The foreign minister, Avigdor Lieberman, from the nationalist Israel Beitenu party, lives in a settlement himself. And you often hear in the media that the settlers are this sort of fringe group within Israeli society, or that it's a movement that sort of has gained a momentum of its own and isn't being directed by the central government. Whereas, in fact, central governments throughout Israel's history since 1967 have promoted the settler movement very, very strongly. And this has accelerated in the last 20 years, and it hasn't mattered if it was Labor or Likud governments, left-wing or right-wing governments. All Israeli governments in that time have promoted the expansion of settlement within the West Bank and Gaza, although, of course, the Gaza settlements were withdrawn from in 2006. And I think to understand this enterprise, really this is the most important map. And this is the Alon plan. Yigal Alon was an Israeli general who was very prominent in the 1967 war. And immediately following Israeli victory, prominent members of the defense and political establishments got together to form a plan on what to do with the newly acquired territories. And one of their primary considerations was to create a geographically secure Israeli state.